Are Darkshards any good in patch 6.0.5? It's not that I haven't covered Darkshards before, but let's go over them again in light of a lot of the rest of the roster. Darkshards are easily an S-tier unit in terms of when you get them, what they can do for you, and their potential to wreck. They have distinct weaknesses, are finicky, fragile, and generally a lot of trouble. But the upside and the easy availability basically define the roster. Recruited for 550 gold and 138 upkeep. The basic version, without shields, is something you may be forced to recruit, probably because of building limitations rather than a lack of gold. On Ultra scale, they come at 90 entities, 5,670 health unit wide, armor is 30, leadership is a modest 56, speed 33, charge speed 41 is reasonably nimble. Melee attack begins at 18, which is not shocking for a low tier quote-unquote ranged unit, but is pretty low. Attack interval is 4.3, so like Dwarf Warriors, no splash damage whatsoever. Melee defense begins at 16, once again expected, once again pathetic. Weapon strength is 24, split between base 19 and armor piercing 5, which is not worst case, but they can slice down a few zombies. Charge bonus is 6, and mass is 100. I'm not going to go into ranged without touching on the shields version. Here, your recruit cost is 650 gold, upkeep is 163, and this provides tower shields, blocking 55% of small arms missile fire from the front. This is still a unit with only 5,670 health and modest leadership only, so it's very bad to overestimate its staying power, but with that caveat, it's still 55% more durable in a frontal missile duel with a huge amount of ranged units in the game. It matters and it adds up. And, not to be remiss, it drags melee defense from 16 all the way up to 24, so yes, they will hold better in melee combat, much as you don't want them to be in it. So, ranged. Ammunition starts at 18 with an asterisk we'll get to shortly. Range of 125 is substantially below Empire crossbowmen, let alone High Elf archers. It's like every single Dark Elf unit was designed with a weakness, and range is definitely the key one here. Missile strength is officially listed as 20, but each bolt is base 3 damage and armor piercing 11 per impact. The Dark Elf crossbows fire 2 bolts per volley, and that's for every 1 point of ammunition. These bolts arc like arrows when required, so they can shoot over your friendly lines to a fair extent. Total accuracy is given as 20, calibration distance 90 means they're extra inaccurate past that range, and calibration area of 3.4 is a decent amount of spread, but nothing to cry about. There is no multi-target penetration. Now for traits. All we have are Hidden Forest and Murderous Prowess, but let's go over the latter. When the army procs this, 90 seconds duration, not only is it plus 15 leadership, plus 25% melee attack, which isn't much because 25% of a low value is still miserable, and plus 25% charge bonus, same deal. But, unlike a Greenskin Wa, or at least most of them, you also get plus 20% to armor-piercing missile damage for the duration, and to reiterate, that duration is 90 seconds. So any armor-piercing missile units still standing will be hitting notably harder. Hitting more often is great, charge bonus can be handy, but simply doing 20% more damage per projectile is amazing, and is consistent, though the army ability overall is not something you want to have to rely on. So, off to the red line skills. It is a quirk of this unit that Line Breaker applies to it, granting at 3 pips melee attack plus 6 and melee defense plus 6, but it also benefits from Sheath Master, for a max of plus 20% ammunition and 8% reload time reduction. In other words, you do get some benefits from having Darkshards in a bog standard basic army with tower shield walls in front and Darkshards behind, and speccing into that. But it's blunter to say it's only with the shields version you can expect any melee survivability, but melee defense 30 at rank 0 is pretty interesting. Darkshards also benefit from Call the Unworthy if they are rank 7 or above. While this is used for the basic melee troops too, what it does is armor plus 10, weapon strength plus 12%, plus 12% to missile strength, and plus 15% to missile resistance. I put particular emphasis on the last two, but hey, all of it is good, really. 55% missile block, plus 15% missile resistance. For what gets past that, plus extra armor, Much more survivable against anything missile that's not a spell or a titanic, high-explosive round a la Queen Bess. In the tech tree, Driven by Vengeance gives recruitment cost -5% and melee attack +4, kind of token where a missile unit is concerned, but with Linebreaker it's starting to be decent. Still, we're talking last resorts. Marching to War is +10% speed, and these were nimble crossbowmen. Martial Society is recruit rank +2. Ascension through Battle is +5 to shaky leadership. Forged to Kill grants +10% weapon strength, and crucially, +10% to missile strength, and reworked crossbows is one of the key techs for the faction, ammunition +20% and range +15%, at least getting them closer to where the competition is. So how do we use Darkshards? This is where I make a brief rant on key weaknesses of Darkshards besides the range. They like arranging themselves in tight, tidy formations, which are tailor-made for raking with missile fire, cannon fire, mortars, wind spells, vortex spells. It's a lot, and they're vulnerable to basically everything but small arms fire from the front, and that's if and only if they're using shields. They like to rearrange the entire formation when firing at something 5 degrees to the left. They don't fire whilst moving either. There's a lot here that's pretty infuriating. If they're out of range for their own attacks, or in range but only for attacks against melee units and not enemy ranged, they can be shot to pieces, and shields only slow that process down. Finally, things like High Elf Spearmen and Lothern Seaguard exist, so losing 55% of your potential damage to shields really saps the power out of this unit. There, rant over. One of the best tricks you can use with Darkshards is a particular name of power supersizing the range, but even without that, there's help you can find in the faction. Some of this is magical, since Lore of Fire and Lore of Death are both available and have options for instant magical attack imbuement. Some of this is from Lords. Generic ranged Lords grant reload time reduction in their red lines. However, most of it is from having double-shot armor-piercing projectiles, and from total accuracy rising in rank, and the fact this mixture, in sufficient quantities, simply melts, chariots, dragons, mounted lords, all sorts of stuff. Black orcs, chosen with halberds, they melt. It takes some very special stuff, like steam tanks from the front, to really resist it, and even then it's slowing things down. Of course, that's if you're in range. Darkshards constitute the kill zone you're trying to lure stuff into so that it dies. Your number of Darkshards has a lot to do with how fragile your army is, but on the flip side, any army with Darkshards, without a proper counter by the enemy, can be a very deadly army. Thus, while they are easily counterable by a lot of things, they also counter their counters if able to get their shots off. If heroes can stop chariots in their ruts long enough to be shot, if a couple of masters hold that dragon at bay, and so on. This is why they are absolutely core to the Dark Elves experience. One special mention is that they can be very bad on offense in sieges due to their short range. They can fire if an armored unit hangs around on walls without ranged support, but you basically only deal with that when fighting chaos, and the towers can still kill you. They're armor-piercing, not wall-piercing. The range can be a liability when defending a siege, but often winnable sieges are won mainly because the Darkshards and the towers did so much damage the enemy just broke. Take care, and have fun darkening the skies. That's the higher level of generic lore passive. 20% real time reduction can't be wrong. Not with Darkshards.